Welcome to Your Bookkeeping Matters. I'm Lisa Turner, bringing you short and snackable weekly episodes on bookkeeping and business matters in an easy to understand way so you can be in control and confident that you know your bookkeeping matters. Let's dive into this week's episode. Welcome back to Your Bookkeeping Matters. In today's installment, we're tackling a common conundrum many small business owners face. You're GST registered, now what? You know the scenario, you've taken the plunge and registered for GST, goods and services tax here in Australia, perhaps with the help of your accountant or maybe even you did it yourself. But either way, it's a significant milestone, a sign of your business's growth. But it's also a fork in the road where confusion and uncertainty often lurk and keep you awake at night. At My Practice Accounted For You, we've seen this scenario unfold many times. New clients join us and we discover their invoices aren't quite compliant with the ATO. They're losing sleep over BAS deadlines because things have piled up they didn't know what to do. And there's a constant worry something important is slipping through the cracks. Well, here's the good news. You don't have to navigate these GST waters alone or with a persistent feeling of uncertainty. Today, I want to shine a light on the path ahead once you've registered for GST and give you a simple guide making managing the steps after registering a breeze. By the time we wrap up this episode, you'll be armed with the knowledge and confidence you need to handle your shiny new GST registration like a pro. I want to turn the complex into the clear, so let's dive in. Let me take one step back in case you're not yet at the point of registering, but listening along and nodding your head wondering, what do you mean, GST registered? Don't I dive in and start charging GST whenever I like? Or is there a step in there somewhere I've missed? Well, you're not alone in this thought process. Many business owners assume once they've set up shop or close to the threshold, they can immediately start charging GST on their products or services. It seems straightforward, right? But here's the thing. The GST journey has a few steps before you officially become a GST registered business. Before you go and pop that extra 10% on your invoices, you need to actually register for this tax with the ATO, the Australian Tax Office. You can do this online or through your tax or BAS agent. To get the ins and outs on this one, dive back to one of my very first episodes, GST, what is it and when should I register? Now let's get back to what to do once you've taken the milestone step to become GST registered. While this episode is specifically for Australian listeners, the process is very similar across other countries, but be sure to check in with your local requirements and current rates. Now, the nitty-gritty of what you need to do right after becoming GST registered starts with an extremely crucial step. Updating your accounting software settings. Yes, if you're registered for GST, you absolutely should be using accounting software. And the software needs to know you've officially joined the GST club. Luckily, this process is simpler than it might sound, but it's super important to get it right from the get-go. Here's your action plan. Go into your accounting software settings and update your tax options or settings to include GST and turn on your BAS and GST reporting. The settings area is different, of course, for every software. But while you're in there, you can check that the GST rate is set correctly at 10%. This is the Australian current rate, of course. It generally will already have that in there, but you can, of course, check it. Then, depending on your software, update your chart of accounts, the different buckets you classify all your income and expenses into to make sure they have the relevant tax rate default settings on each one. Because remember, not everything has GST. And these tax settings that you put onto each account, it's only the default suggestion. So it might change from time to time. It will suggest what you've put there as the default, but remember you need to check that for each transaction and different transaction types. If you get stuck here or at any of these steps, enlist the help of your trusty professional. Also, most of the software have great online support articles. Your accounting software will now be set up and ready to take care of GST for you and generate reports that you need to run to review and check and prepare your lodgements for the ATO, like your BAS, your business activities statement. Now, here's a part where questions pop up and can get a bit tricky. When and where to charge GST on your sales? This is the next part now you've registered. While not everything in Australia has GST, we'll presume for the sake of this episode, keeping things simple, everything you sell has GST. The earlier episode I mentioned on GST breaks down GST-free items more if that's something that's applicable in your business. But in our example, everything you sell has GST applicable. Imagine this, you're all set up as a GST registered business, but the invoices you send to your customers or clients don't reflect this correctly. You send them out without adding GST where it should be. This can lead to confusion, disputes, and wrong amounts claimed or not claimed by your customers. Definitely not the path you want to take, right? What you need to do is take a close look at your invoicing settings now, whether you're invoicing straight from your accounting software or running an e-commerce website that does your invoicing, using a point of sale system, or selling on the various other platforms like Etsy and Amazon and the like. Ensure they're all set up to apply GST on your sales where necessary. Now, why is this step so important? Charging the right amount of GST ensures you're not overcharging your customers, which can affect your business's reputation and your customer relationships. On the flip side, undercharging means you might end up paying the GST out of your pocket. And this can happen if your settings include GST when you wanted the system to add GST on top for you. So make sure you know what's happening here and run some test invoices to make sure the final result is what you're after sales-wise. Plus, the tax office doesn't take too kindly to businesses messing up their GST. You want to avoid any tax-related headaches, believe me. So by making sure your sales platforms are GST savvy, you are not only staying compliant, but also saving yourself from future headaches. It's always easier to set things up the right way from the start than trying to fix things down the track. So you've updated your software settings and checked your sales are charging GST where they should. What about GST credits from your expenses? This is the next step to be aware of. And often glossed over part of registering, you now get to claim GST credits. These reduce the amount that you have to pay to the ATO for any GST that you've paid on your expenses. However, and this is important, not everything you pay for out of the business account is a valid business expense. So even if it has GST, if it wasn't a business expense, you can't claim the GST. And 2, not everything has GST. So this step after registering for GST for those valid business expenses is to check each and every invoice for the GST you can claim by checking the purchase actually has GST, because remember, not everything has GST and not all suppliers are registered to charge GST. So if you think you can claim GST on everything, you will land in hot water pretty fast and could wind up with some pretty big tax bills and penalties coming your way. Let's not be that person. To make sure it's not you, set up a process for checking the invoices for your expenses and the supplier's registration to make sure they're registered, and code your invoices in your software as you go. Don't let it pile up until the day before your BAS is due and stress yourself out. Now, to check those suppliers and make sure they're registered for GST if they've charged GST, you can use a handy little tool called the ABR lookup, which I've mentioned in a few different episodes. I'll link that in the show notes. You pop in their ABN and it tells you if they're registered for GST or not. It's very straightforward and clear. Now, you've got your software updated, your invoices are charging the right amount of GST, and you're only claiming those precious GST credits where they belong. What's next? Well, in Australia, the final piece of the GST puzzle is preparing and lodging your BAS. But what exactly is the BAS? One of my other earlier episodes, What is a BAS, is the next episode you want to listen to and pop on your playlist. But it's your report to the ATO, your business activity statement, and it says, hey, here's how much GST I've collected from my customers, and here's how much I'm owed in GST credits because of my business expenses, and this is what is left for me to pay. And sometimes the ATO might even owe you a refund. Now, depending on your own lodgement cycle, which depends on your own registration because it could be monthly, quarterly, or annually, and all depends on if you voluntarily registered and different revenue thresholds. But that dictates how often you need to lodge this report. So once you have those dates, pop them on your calendar. It's crucial not to miss these deadlines. The ATO takes these lodgements so seriously, and failing to meet them can lead to hefty penalties and headaches you would rather avoid, trust me. So there you have it. Navigating the world of GST registration might seem all too much, but with the right knowledge, you can break down what needs to be done and keep on top of things. Remember, updating your software, charging GST correctly, and claiming those GST credits on eligible expenses are important pieces of the puzzle. A huge thank you for tuning in today to discover now what when you've registered for GST. I'm so happy to be able to pop in your ears with these short and snackable episodes to guide you on your financial matters. If you're hungry for more financial tidbits and want them delivered straight to your inbox every fortnight, be sure to visit my website, accountedforyou.com.au, and join the numbers list. And I'll chat to you next week.